Hi, I'm Hanbit, and I'm a pastry chef from Korea. Hi everybody, it's Hanbit here. 안녕하세요, 조한빛입니다. Thanks for waiting for this video. I know that so many of you have been waiting for my tiramisu recipe, Hanbit's tiramisu. Tiramisu is an iconic Italian dessert that everybody loves. Tiramisu in Italian means pick me up or cheer me up, and it makes perfect sense because tiramisu is so delicious. What's so great about a tiramisu, other than the fact that it's delicious and decadent, is that you don't need an oven. So for those of you who are watching this tutorial and you don't have an oven, you can still make an amazing tiramisu using my recipe. I've put in a lot of thought into this recipe so that it's as delicious as possible and it's as simple as possible. I'm going to take a moment to talk about the components of a regular tiramisu and the thought that I put in developing my recipe. You can skip this part and go straight to making the tiramisu, but I duly recommend you to stay on and hear me out because this is really going to help you understand the tiramisu. There are three components to a tiramisu. Of course, you can have more than three in other variations, but you would have at least three. The first component, the bottom layer of a tiramisu, would be ladyfinger or savoiardi dipped in some sort of coffee syrup. The next layer would be the tiramisu cream, and the final layer on top would be the cocoa powder. Now, I'll go through the components in a bit more detail. The bottom layer. You would typically use ladyfinger or savoiardi, which is essentially the same thing. You can make the ladyfingers from scratch, but to be honest, I always use store-bought ones. They're great, and you don't need to spend the time in making ladyfingers. Well, how about the coffee syrup then? I would normally recommend you to use good quality espresso because it does make a difference. It's so much better than using instant coffee because this is Italian after all. But of course, if you can't get hold of espresso, you will need to resort to instant coffee. Additionally, because I'm a pastry chef, I always use a lot of liquor. So in this case, I would use a bit of coffee liquor, but that's up to you. The next layer would be the tiramisu cream. And we need to talk about cheese here. I've seen recipes using cream cheese, but I'll be honest, you shouldn't. Not only are you not meant to use cream cheese, but taste-wise, you have to use mascarpone cheese. It tastes so much better than cream cheese. And finally, the top layer will be cocoa powder, and you would want to use high-quality cocoa powder. Now, there are a couple of ingredients that I paid special attention to when I was developing this tiramisu recipe. A was the eggs, B, it was the gelatin. Now, let's talk about the eggs. There are recipes out there that use whole eggs or egg yolks only. Using whole eggs would definitely give a lighter texture, but using egg yolks would give a deeper flavor. I always prefer a deeper, richer flavor for a tiramisu, so I'm going to use egg yolks only. The other question is about using raw eggs. The traditional tiramisu would use a raw egg because it's easy, it's simple, and it's quick. If you're fine with raw eggs and you have chickens laying fresh eggs in your backyard, then that's fine. But I know that that's not normally the case. But an exception would be if you can buy pasteurized egg yolks, that would be different. You can buy them in certain countries, and yes, you can do so in Korea as well. And they come in cartons like milk. And they're very safe and they're clean and you can trust them. But unless you can find pasteurized egg yolks or find fresh eggs from your backyard, I will pasteurize the eggs when making a tiramisu. Now, the gelatin. You would have seen recipes that use gelatin, and the purpose of gelatin is to hold your tiramisu together. You need to bloom the gelatin and you need to melt the bloom gelatin in some sort of a solution. So you would say either heated milk, heavy cream, or a hot puree or some sort. It's a lot of work, and if you don't get it right, you're going to get gelatin lumps inside your tiramisu, and that's not going to taste nice and that's not going to look nice. Therefore, I'm not going to use a gelatin, but I'm going to use a technique in my recipe so that your tiramisu would hold itself together. Here are the ingredients for the coffee syrup. Obviously espresso, and I'm going to extract espresso in a minute. Hot water, sugar, coffee liquor, and I'm going to use Kahlua for that, and instant coffee. And what the coffee liquor and instant coffee do in this case, it would intensify the overall coffee flavor and make the coffee syrup taste better. Espresso. This is freshly extracted espresso. Hot water. Sugar. Coffee liquor. Regarding the coffee liquor, if you want to feel the alcohol, you can add it in after the coffee syrup has cooled down. Instant coffee. Now it's just a matter of mixing everything together. Right, so that's coffee syrup done. Now I'm ready to dip my ladyfingers in the coffee syrup. I've got my ladyfingers and the coffee syrup. Whether you're using a small pan or a large pan, you need to dip the ladyfingers in the coffee syrup and lay them down at the bottom of the pan. Today, I'm going to use an oval-shaped carton, which is really cute. But what I've realized is that the standard size ladyfinger doesn't really fit inside the carton. So I'm going to cut the end, and if I do, I'll be able to fit 2 of them in. You can see that I can fit 2 of them. Now I'm going to dip my ladyfinger in the coffee syrup. The tip is to just dip it and take it out. You don't want to leave it inside the coffee syrup for like half a minute because it will soak up too much of the syrup and you won't be able to take it out. Just try and squish it in at the bottom. You can definitely fit 2 inside here. Another way to do this job is to lay the ladyfingers first at the bottom of the carton and pour the coffee syrup on top of it. The base is all done and I'm going to put this in the fridge to chill. While it chills down, I'm going to work on the tiramisu cream. Tiramisu cream. The ingredients are fairly simple. Obviously you need the mascarpone cheese. Please use mascarpone cheese. It makes all the difference. Egg yolk. I prefer using egg yolk over whole eggs because it gives a richer, deeper flavor. And basically I'm going to use egg yolk, water and sugar to make the pâte à baume, which I'm going to show you in a minute. And we have heavy cream. So essentially you only need 5 ingredients to make the tiramisu cream. First of all, I'm going to lightly beat the mascarpone cheese, add in the heavy cream and whip to the desired consistency. After that, I'm going to work on the pâte à baume and add that in to the whipped mascarpone cheese and heavy cream. So this is mascarpone cheese out from the fridge, and obviously your heavy cream needs to be chilled as well. Don't beat it heavily because you're going to add in the heavy cream and whip it anyway. Just beat it lightly. Now the heavy cream goes in. Some people whip the heavy cream separately in another bowl and fold that into the mascarpone cheese, but you don't need to do that. You can just add the heavy cream into the mascarpone and whip it all together. It is so much simpler that way and saves dishwashing. Now, I'm going to whip this to the desired consistency. Just scrape the sides once in a while. It looks a bit thick at the moment, but the pâte à baume is relatively runny, so that's going to balance it out. I'm going to keep this in the fridge while I work on the pâte à baume. Right, I'll work on the pâte à baume. Generally, when you say pâte à baume, it's where you add hot sugar syrup into egg yolk. You whip the egg yolk while adding the sugar syrup so that it doesn't cook, but actually get whipped into a fluffy, syrupy texture. It's one of the best ways to pasteurize the eggs. However, I'm going to use a slightly different pâte à baume method today. Rather than making a hot sugar syrup from water and sugar and pour that into the egg yolk, I'm going to add these 3 together and bring the temperature up to around 85 degrees Celsius using a hot water bath. And the reason why I'm using this hot water bath pâte à baume method is because I'm making in small quantities. The problem with sugar syrup is that if you're using, let's say, 30 grams of sugar to make a sugar syrup, you will most likely lose a lot of sugar syrup by getting them stuck to the side of the saucepan. And what that means is that not only did you lose a lot of that hot sugar syrup, meaning it'll be less sweet than you expected, but also you won't be able to properly pasteurize your egg yolk. With the hot water bath method, you don't have any of those problems. So I've got hot water in the pot. I'm going to add all these 3 in here. Egg yolk, water, and sugar. I'm going to bring the temperature up to around 85 degrees Celsius. You need to be careful so that the egg yolk doesn't cook. Just stir constantly. If you think the water is boiling too much, just feel free to turn it off. And if you feel that too much heat is coming up, then feel free to take it on, off, on, off. Great, now my egg yolks are pasteurized and they're safe. If you look here, you can see that there's minimal loss compared to the syrup pate bomb method. Now I'm going to whip this to get a thick syrupy texture. Perfect. So this has lightened up and it's become thick as well. Look at the color. It's turned kind of beige, light yellow color because air has been incorporated. Plus, the temperature has dropped to around 23, 24 degrees Celsius, which is perfect. The pate bomb goes in. I'm going to fold in the pate bomb. You can also use a hand mixer if you wish. It makes it easier. Now, what do you think of this consistency? You can see that it's too soft. So you just need to whip it again and thicken it. It's as simple as that. This cream contains heavy cream and quite a lot of heavy cream. So if you whip it, it will be whipped and it will become thick. Obviously, you shouldn't overdo it and make it too thick. You do need to care about the thickness of the cream because you're not going to add in any gelatin in this recipe, so you do have to whip it to a certain consistency. Great, that is definitely thicker than it was previously, and that is the consistency that I'm looking for. Into the piping bag. Now, it's just a matter of thoroughly piping on top of the lady finger. I'm going to tap it against the mat to flatten it out. What the tapping does is it not only flattens the surface, but it also releases the air bubbles that are trapped inside. By the way, if you want a really smooth surface, then you can smooth it out using a teaspoon or a spatula. Great, we're almost done. I'm now going to put this in the fridge, leave it there to set completely. Now, here's my tiramisu that's completely set, and I'm going to dust cocoa powder on top, plus a bit of decoration. And now I'm going to decorate it to make it look nice. My logo goes in. And a bit of green to bring it to life. It's time to try my amazing tiramisu. Wow, look at that. Look at the ladyfinger dipped in espresso coffee syrup and the mascarpone cream with cocoa powder on top. I am lost for words. How do you serve tiramisu? You need to store the tiramisu in the fridge and you're meant to dust the cocoa powder just before serving. However, there are situations where you need to complete your tiramisu including the cocoa powder and store that. The problem here is that the cocoa powder absorbs the moisture from the mascarpone cream below. So really, you can't prepare this in advance, but you need to dust the cocoa powder just before serving. So theoretically, you can't prepare a perfect tiramisu in advance. But I have a tip that I'm going to share with you that will get around this problem. Shh! The secret is in the snow sugar. Snow sugar is a non-melting sugar powder. It's great for tiramisu, but you can use it anywhere on desserts where you don't want your sugar powder to melt. First, I'm going to dust the snow sugar over the tiramisu. I'm going to dust it as much as I would dust the cocoa powder. And now I'm going to dust the cocoa powder on top of the snow sugar. The The snow sugar is a protective layer between the cocoa powder and the mascarpone cream, and therefore you can prepare a completed tiramisu in advance and you'll be fine. Hope you've enjoyed this tutorial on the tiramisu. I've tried to be as detailed as possible in my explanations of the ingredients and the process, and that's why I've called this the Tiramisu Masterclass. As long as you follow it step by step, tiramisu is definitely a doable dessert. You don't even need an oven, so extremely light in terms of the equipment you need. So please try it and impress your families and friends. I'll come up with other ideas regarding the tiramisu in terms of different recipes or different designs. For example, the tiramisu we made today was a tiramisu made in a pan. However, you can alter the design and turn this into a format of a plated dessert. Anyway, I'll come up with other ideas for the tiramisu and make another tutorial. Until then, thank you very much. 감사합니다.